Hello Art 200 class, my name is Janelle Chickering and I chose to do my video research project on Pablo Picasso. So Pablo Picasso, he was born on October 25th, 1881 in Malaga, Spain, and he is regarded as one of the greatest and most influential artists of the 20th century. He's known for co-founding the Cubist movement, the invention of constructed sculpture, the co-invention of collage, and for the wide variety of styles that he helped develop and explore. So Pablo Picasso had 5 major periods of work during his life. There's the Blue period, the Rose period, the African influence period, Cubism, and finally Classicism and Surrealism. So before getting into those, I thought I would start off with just a few random facts that I found out about Picasso. So Pablo Picasso's full name was Pablo Diego Jose Francisco de Paula Juan Nepomuceno Maria de los Remedios Soprano de la Santísima Trinidad Marta Patricio Clito Ruiz y Picasso. Yes, Picasso's full name has 23 words. He was named after various saints and relatives. Another one is that Picasso's first word was actually pencil. Kind of. His first word was piece, which is short for lápiz, which in Spanish means pencil. Lastly, Picasso is most famously known for his paintings, but he was also a sculptor, printmaker, ceramicist, stage designer, poet, and playwright. Okay, so Picasso's Blue period. It started in 1901 and lasted until 1904. It began either in early Spain in 1901 or in Paris in the second half of the year. It's kind of debated about when it really started. So having renounced his traditional education, Picasso and his friend Carlos Casagemas went searching for fame, and they moved to Paris. A year later, Casagemas he found love, and he was trying to make it work, but it didn't. He had this failed love, and he just became so distraught and hopelessly miserable that he committed suicide. And his suicide greatly affected Picasso. Picasso, he became very depressed and desolate. In addition to this, Picasso was very poor, and it made him start to identify and relate with beggars, prostitutes, and other outcasts in society. These events and circumstances were most likely what led up to the beginning of Picasso's Blue period. Picasso also later recalled, "I started painting in blue when I learned of Casagemas' death." The Blue period is identified by the blue and green shades that Picasso commonly used to paint these melancholy figures that looked like they were so lost in contemplation. So this is The Old Guitarist. It was painted obviously by Pablo Picasso, and it's a work of art that I think represents his period very well. It was painted in 1903, just after the death of Picasso's close friend. So this work was created in Madrid. So the brown guitar in the picture represents this painting's only shift in color. Both physically and symbolically, the guitar fills the space around the man who seems to be oblivious to his blindness and poverty as he plays. During this period, the symbolism of a blind man was that he's able to possess these powers of inner vision. The man in the picture, he also has these elongated limbs and cramped angular posture that actually shows the influence of 16th century artist El Greco. Picasso's Rose period. It lasted from 1904 to 1906. I like to consider these some of the happier times of Picasso because he was in a happy relationship with Ferdinand Oliver, whom he met in 1904. And this has been one of the suggested possible reasons that he actually changed his style of painting. This tends to be a common theme in Picasso's work. He bases his work around the events in his life and the large amount of women that he's been with. If you've ever looked, he got around. He had a lot of women. So following Picasso's Blue period, Picasso's Rose period represents more pleasant themes of clowns, harlequins, carnival performers, and they're all depicted in these vivid hues of red, orange, and pink, and just earth tones. And the Rose period has been considered French-influenced, while the Blue period was considered more Spanish-influenced, although both styles emerged while Picasso was living in Paris. The Acrobat and the Young Harlequin. It was painted in 1905, and it shows Picasso's unique contribution to Expressionism. The acrobat appears to be the father figure, placing his left hand on the shoulder of the young harlequin, which shows the dominance between the two. In the painting, Picasso elaborates on the theme that artists were seen as undervalued, social, and sufferers to society. Okay, moving on to Picasso's African influence period, which lasted from 1906 to 1909. So during this period, Picasso, he painted in a style which was strongly influenced by African sculpture and particularly traditional African masks. His first interest was sparked by Henry Matisse, who showed him a mask from the Dan people of Africa. He spent several years exploring African art. During this time, the French Empire was expanding into Africa, and they were sending all these African artifacts back to Paris museums. And the press was excitedly telling these exaggerated stories about of cannibalism and the exotic tales about the African kingdom of Dahomey. There was also a lot of talk about the mistreatment of Africans in the Belgian Congo through Joseph Conrad's popular book, Heart of Darkness. It was natural that with this huge hype of the African interest that Picasso would also look towards African artifacts for inspiration for some of his work. Pablo Picasso, he came into the possession of these ancient Iberian sculptures that he got from an acquaintance who had actually stolen them from a Louvre museum in Paris. In Picasso's painting Les Demoiselles d'Avignon, painted in 1907, it's actually one of his proto-cubist pictures, but there's still it was painted in 1907, so during the African influence period, and even though it's the beginning of his cubism stage, you could still tell there's a lot of African influence. So the faces of the three women on the left are based on these stolen Iberian sculptures. So as to avoid compositional monotony, Picasso based the faces of the two women on the right on African totem art that he also corrected. Les Demoiselles d'Avignon was originally supposed to be a brothel scene of prostitutes with their male customer. Picasso made radical changes in progress, ending with an image of intertwined figure in space that began an art movement known as Cubism. The Vision of St. John, also known as the Opening of the Fifth Seal by El Greco, is an artwork that is very similar to Les Demoiselles d'Avignon. The painting is just a fragment from a large altarpiece commissioned for the Church of the Hospital of St. John the Baptist in Toledo. The canvas was an iconic work for Picasso, who knew it in Paris and used it as inspiration for Les Demoiselles d'Avignon. In 1911, Picasso was recognized as the inventor of Cubism. Analytic Cubism, from 1909 to 1912, is a style of painting Picasso developed with Jorge Brock that included mostly neutral colors. Instead of an emphasis on color, analytic cubists focused on forms like cylinder, sphere, and the cone to represent the natural world. The objects are analyzed and then broken up and then reassembled in an abstracted form. Instead of depicting objects from one viewpoint, the artist depicts the subjects from multitudes of viewpoints in order to represent the subject in a greater context. So there's also synthetic cubism, which was from 1912 to 1919. So this was a further development of the genre in which the artists, they would cut paper fragments, usually from wallpaper portions or newspaper articles, and then they pasted them into compositions, marking the first use of collage in art. Cubism has been considered the most influential art movement in the 20th century. The impact of Cubism was far-reaching and wide-ranging. Cubism spread like wildfire across the globe, and in doing so, it evolved to greater or to a lesser extent. In essence, Cubism was the starting point of an evolutionary process that produced diversity. It was the antecedent of diverse art movements. Module Lee was painted by Pablo Picasso in 1911. It also means My Pretty Girl or My Beautiful Girl, and it was part of a popular song performed at the Parisian Hall that Picasso went to frequently. Module Lee was also Picasso's nickname for his lover, Marcelle Humbert, whose figure he loosely built using the signature shifting planes of analytic cubism. The artist suggests this musical association by situating a treble clef and music staff near the bold stenciled letters. When I first looked at this painting, I had no idea it was supposed to be an artist beloved, but there are clues to its representational content. A triangular form in the lower center is strung like a guitar. Below the strings can be seen 4 fingers, An elbow juts to the right, and in the upper half, what may be a floating smile is barely discernible amid the new network of flat, semi-transparent planes. So although the figure appears to disappear in an abstract network of flat, straightened, semi-transparent planes, together these elements suggest a woman holding a musical instrument. Thus it manages to be both a representative piece of high analytic cubism, while at the same time representing a very traditional theme. The Portuguese, painted by Jorge Brock in 1911, was painted in the same year that Picasso painted Majoli. As you can see, these paintings are really similar, and that is of course because Brock and Picasso developed analytic cubism together. So of course, this time period, their paintings look very similar, as you can tell. So on to the last period in Picasso's artwork. It's the Classicism and the Surrealism period, and it lasted from 1918 to 1945. After Cubism, Picasso returned to more traditional patterns. Even if they weren't exactly classical ones, this period is known as his classicist period. In 1918, Picasso married a woman named Olga Kolkovala. The young couple moved into an apartment and started to live a more leisurely life. They acquired servants and a chauffeur and began to move into different social circles. This was no doubt Olga's doing. Olga. The chaotic get-togethers that Picasso once had with his artistic friends gradually changed into more formal receptions. Picasso's image of himself changed as well, and this was reflected in the more conventional style that he adopted in his art and the way he consciously made use of artistic traditions and ceased to be proactive. In this period, following the upheaval of World War I, Picasso produced work in a neoclassical style. Picasso's paintings and drawings from this period frequently recall the work of Raphael and Ingres. Jumping ahead to the period from the summer of 1928, which coincided with his involvement with Surrealism, Picasso began a series of works that are fantastic and visionary in character. Surrealism is a cultural movement that began in the early 1920s and is best known for its visual artworks and writings. Surrealist theory was based on a simplistic understanding of the writings of Sigmund Freud, recrafted for the use of poets and visual artists. The Surrealist movement was growing in strength and popularity at the time, and even Picasso could not really avoid being influenced by this group of Parisian artists. During the 1930s, the Minotaur replaced the Harlequin as a common motif in Picasso's work. His use of the Minotaur came partly from his contact with Surrealists, and it appears in Picasso's Guernica. Arguably, Picasso's most famous work is his depiction of the German bombing of Guernica, painted in 1937 during the Spanish Civil War. Guernica shows tragedies of the war and the suffering it inflicts upon individuals, particularly innocent civilians. This work has gained a monumental status, becoming a perpetual reminder of the tragedies of war, an anti-war symbol, and an embodiment of peace. On completion, Guernica was displayed around the world in a brief tour, becoming famous and widely acclaimed. This tour helped bring the Spanish Civil War to the world's attention. Asked to explain its symbolicism, Picasso said, "It isn't up to the painter to define the symbols, otherwise it would be better if he wrote them out in so many words. The public who look at the picture must interpret the symbols as they understand them." In the last years of his life, painting became an obsession for Picasso, and he would date each picture with absolute precision, thus creating a vast amount of similar paintings. Then, on April 8th in 1973, Picasso passed away at the old age of 92. Picasso was one of the most influential artists of the 20th century, and without him, art would not be the same today.